Hello, this is another one of those videos where I try and explain something in a very rambly fashion, and I probably won't get to the point very quickly. So during lockdown I've been doing a lot of crafts, and one of the ones that I've been doing is embroidery, and a couple of people have asked me how I do the embroidery, what stitches I do, how I've learned it, and to be quite honest, I've mostly been funning about with different things and finding out what works. So again, I'm by no means an expert at embroidery, but I thought I'd make another quick and rambly video, so probably not that quick, on how I got started. So we're just going to have a look at basic materials that you need, how to store thread, how to split your thread in the best way, and a couple of really basic stitches that I've been using to create something like that. And again, this is made up with really super basic stitches. So when you're starting embroidery, things you will need: an embroidery hoop. Now, embroidery hoops are really important for keeping your fabric taut, because if your fabric isn't taut, then your stitches aren't is neat. I don't know, I'm making that up. I was told by a very impressive embroidery friend of mine that I needed tight fabric. So embroidery hoop, some fabric. So this is just some basic cotton fabric. Any fabric will do. It's sort of slightly see-through, which is great if you want to trace a shape, a needle, and some embroidery thread. You can get lots of different sorts of embroidery thread. This is cotton, and the cotton threads are made up of 6 little threads. We'll have a look at how to split them. Other things that I find, well, probably do need: scissors, and if you want to draw something onto your fabric, the thing that I use is these friction pens. Friction, don't know. They're designed for just standard paper, but they work great on fabric, and your pen marks will go away as soon as you iron it. So you can draw whatever you want on here. And where did that one go? This is what happens when, yeah. So like with this one, I've sort of traced the basic outline of the shapes that I want to fill in. But as soon as I iron this, all these black marks will go away, which is pretty darn handy. So if you want help, if you don't want to freestyle, which I certainly don't because I can't draw, then these pens are super good for avoiding that. Another thing that is really helpful to have, embroidery thread gets really tangled really easily, so I would wrap it round some cards. You can buy these, they come in bulks of 50 or 100 or whatever, but you can essentially, just any old piece of card will do exactly the same thing. So I just butchered a whole load of Christmas cards, which I really appreciated getting, chaps, but I cut a whole load of Christmas cards up when I started doing this. I ran out of these, and I just cut a whole load of these up, and so cardboard is fine. And the reason that I would suggest doing this is if you pull them out one by one, that does work, but it can get really tangled. So it either is fine or it isn't. So what I would suggest is wrapping all of the threads that you're using round something. So I will probably cut me winding this up out, or I might not. So that, see, it sort of gets a bit tangly, but that's okay. If you pull it out, you get a straight long line. Ooh, little knot. That tends to be fine. You just have to give it a little bit of a tug, and it comes apart again. Knots are a thing that happen quite a lot when you're doing embroidery, and usually if you give them a little bit of a tug, they'll come loose. or they'll get tighter and they won't come loose, and then you have to chuck everything in the bin and start again. That's not true. You just have to cut the thread and make do, which is fine. This is really dull to watch. I hope future Sarah does get rid of this. Future Sarah might not be bothered. You can never tell what future Sarah's going to do. So and then you've got your thread all wound up, and you can keep them. I tend to keep them in a box. Also halfway, get onto that. That's fine. So you've got your thread, you've got your fabric, and you've got your embroidery hoop. So I did say this is going to be the very basic. So putting fabric on it to an embroidery hoop is really very straightforward. You've got an outer ring and you've got an inner ring. So the outer ring has a little screw on it, which you need for tightening up. So you put your fabric over that small circle. It's slightly too big for the piece of fabric that I've got, but never mind, we'll work with what we've got. You just push the outer ring over the top, tighten here, and as I said, my very, very clever embroidery friend who knows all about embroidery says, and we shall take her word for it because she's got a degree and everything, that you should always tighten your fabric up. So your fabric on your hoop should be taut like a drum, and you can do that very easily by just tugging at the fabric a little bit. That's pretty good. So these lines are measuring lines for a project I'm doing, but that's okay. They'll go away when I iron it. So just tighten it up. Give the screw a little bit more of a tighten. That's fine. So as you can see, these lines are now slightly distorted. So what I would suggest is putting whatever fabric you want onto your hoop before you draw what you're actually trying to achieve. These are just outline lines, so they're not hugely important. But so with this one, I got the photo, I put it in the hoop, I found the photo I wanted to use, and I sort of drew the outline of where colours blocks should be. So splitting thread. I don't know how long this video is. It's hiding. Oh, it's but a mere 8 minutes. So when you are dealing with embroidery thread, you don't need a huge long piece of thread. If you have a huge long piece of thread, you're more likely to get tangled up. So this is fine. And the best way of splitting thread is to do it one by one, so doing it individually. So most of the stitches that I use, we need 2 strands of this thread. If you want thicker lines, you can use more, and you can of course use all of them if you wanted to. So the easiest way to split this thread is to pinch it lightly at the top, end, whatever you want to call it, and grab a single one of these threads and then just pull. And then sometimes that needs loosening up a little bit, but then it just comes out. So you have a single one, and then you want 2, so you grab another singular one. Now it is very tempting to do 2 pieces at once, but you will get tangled up. Well, you might not get tangled up, but you're more likely to get tangled up than not get tangled up. So I would just do it one at a time. And then if you're wondering what to do with this spare piece of thread, if you're not going to use it all at once, you can just put it around your piece of cardboard or around your bobbin or whatever you've got, or like me, you can make a huge tangled mess with a pile of thread and be unorganised. me unorganised. That doesn't sound like me at all. So you've got your 2 singular strands of that big strand of 6, and what you need to do is thread your needle. Now I assume people know how to thread needles, but because this is the very basics of basics, I shall show you. Because it's my thread and I'm the only person who's been touching it, I just sort of lick the end. Obviously you can use water, you can skip that step entirely. Oh, threading a needle on camera. It's a bit stressful. But thread your needle. And I'm sure that this is against all advice for purists of thread, but that's fine. What I tend to do is I tie a little knot in the bottom of my thread, and I do that by wrapping it around my finger and just sort of scrunching it up there and then pulling down, and I've got a little knot. There are multitudes of ways. If you want to know what they are, then go and Google it. Sarah's answer to everything. So if I show you just a couple of basic stitches that I've been using, I'm just going to draw some lines on here. These are amazing. I use them when I'm quilting and measuring fabric and drawing patterns and all sorts of things. I don't use them for writing university notes, which is what I had originally bought them for. There we go. So I will show you backstitch first of all. Backstitch is a really useful stitch for outlines, but also for filling things in. So it's what I have done here in the sky. I've done backstitch. I'm not going to show you the, oh, I will show you the back. It looks like a mess at the back, but that's okay. So this is backstitch that I've done here, and it's very good for outlines as well. So with backstitch, what you want to do, let's start up here, is go up through your fabric and then down. And then you want to come up through your fabric again, about a stitch apart from that one that you've just made. Come up. Oh, I'm shaking. It's because I'm nervous, which is why I ramble. And then you go back through the hole that you went in for that stitch. And then you come up through that hole that you came out for that one. And you go along like that. And then you get backstitch. So on the back it sort of ends up looking a bit like that. So go up, in, and then you come up out of the one you've just come up from there and in. And that's what it looks like at the back. So you're sort of overlapping this bit twice. So that's backstitch. Another one that I use a lot, I use it a lot when I'm doing stems of flowers. Oh, I got distracted, the people walking down my drive again. I do it for, yeah, flower stems, and again for outlining things, and it's called split stitch. So if we come down to this one, because I think we've had enough of backstitch now, backstitch is really quite straightforward. So split stitch, just turn it around. You just do another little stitch, getting tangled up because my hands are shaking. Okay, little rendition for you. And then with split stitch, you want to come up, but you want to come up between those two. Come on. It is not this difficult in real life, chaps. What am I saying? This is real life. Hang on. So what I did is I just came up where I wanted to, and then I pushed it through those two stitches. Can you see it's come up through those? So we'll do that again. properly. Oh. So you've got your 2 threads and you want to come back through halfway or so and then come back in between the 2 embroidery threads. And if you're using 4, you go and have 2 on each side. And if you're using your whole embroidery thread with 6 strands, you have 3, and you keep going up like that. And it just gives you a little bit more texture and a bit of a fuller line than this one, especially if you do it along the lines that you've drawn, Sarah. Again, like I said, I'm not, by no means am I an expert. I'm probably really loud because I'm talking very near my phone microphone. Sorry about that, chaps. This is, I promise, this is much more straightforward. It's because I usually, this is what I will do. So I've come up underneath. It's not how you're supposed to do it. Just gone through one. It's probably because I'm trying to do it while it's far away from me and I'm going a bit blind. So it goes through the 2 stitches, 2 strands. That's enough of that one. Don't want to do that one again. Chain stitch. I still got some thread. I've still got some thread. Chain stitch is a good stitch again for all sorts of things. So what have I done that's chain stitch here? I've done chain stitch on my gate. My gate is made up of chain stitches that I have then gone in and out of. So chain stitch, you want to come up through your fabric and then down very close to where you came out of or into the same hole, and then you've got all this fabric up here, all this thread here, and you don't want to pull it all the way through. You want to come up again before you pull it all through and go between those 2 pieces of thread, and then once you're in, go back in the hole you came out of and then back up and then loop that round, so you're pulling it round the thread. So back in the hole you came out of, up through the thread, and I got tangled there. That's fine, you can undo it very easily. Cop's ear of this. I did tell you I wasn't a professional. Nobody ever listens to me. Back in and then up again, and then into those 2 and up. So you've got a nice, again, it's another thicker line. And if you want a thicker line again, which is what I did in my gate post, once you get to the end of your chain stitch, instead of going back into the hole you came out of, you need to go very, very close to the bit at the top, because otherwise it will unravel. And then what I did to make my wrapped chain stitch for this gate post, chucking the phone everywhere, chucking the phone. Come on. Gate post here is come up again, and you just go underneath without going into the fabric. You just go in around it. and then you've got an even sort of thicker line, and then just at the end tuck yourself back in. Okay, so that's chain stitch, and then, well, I've done wrapped chain stitch. Satin stitch is a good fill stitch. The bricks here have been done with satin stitch. So satin stitch is a fill stitch. So if we just draw something that needs filling. Ever the professional. We've got enough yarn. So come up. Obviously, if you're not doing one of these things, then you have another little knot, and then you go in, and then you come back out, but you come back out very close to where you just came out. And then you go back in very close to where you just went out there. And you keep going like that until you've filled up whatever shape you want to do. Okay, so you just keep going along with very little stitches. So if you see on the back, for that one, those are all the thread that's on this side of the fabric. So it's very good for filling, because otherwise, this is another way you can fill stitch. Oh, this is called satin stitch, isn't it? But this uses a lot of thread, and they do that by just coming out at the top and going back in, which with some shapes you have to do because they're a little bit fiddly. But like you can see, it uses a lot more thread. And then I was going to show you how to do French knots. I love French knots. All of these flowers are little French knots. This bush here is a little French knot, and I'm making these rocks here out of French knots. This is also backstitch, by the way. You just wiggly line backstitch. Do what you want with backstitch. But with French knots, I want a bit more thread than I have left here. So if we finish this off on the back, so I do that by just going in, and then there's a little loop there, so I go in there and then I just pull and tighten up, and that's that one finished with. How long are we? 23 minutes. Oh, I might put a a little advisory of when things are. You can speed things up. You know how speedy uppy works. So with French knots, you can use any number of fabric. Because I don't really want to bother splitting this, I'm just going to use 4 because I can. Ha ha ha. So let's do some French knots. French knots are really good for the middle of flowers, and also for filling things if that's what you want to do. So let's put some French knots here. So come up from the bottom, and then I like to hold this thread that's come up in my, well, I'm right-handed, so in my left hand, just pinch it so it's tight. Take your needle, wrap it round once, wrap it round twice, so you've got thread on there, okay? And then go back just by the hole that you came out of, and the trick is to keep the thread taut. So keep pinching it with your non-dominant hand, and then at the end just pull it through. So if you don't keep it taut, it's likely to come unravelled, and then you'll just have a little stitch. So come up, hold on tight to it with your non-dominant hand, take your needle, wrap it round once, wrap it round twice, and then go back in very close to where you came out. Keep pulling the thread with your non-dominant, keeping it taut, and then pull through. In. And you can do these next to each other. You can of course do them in different colours. It is easier with a slightly longer bit of thread though, so you have enough wiggle room. So always holding tight here and then pull it through. Sometimes things get caught on there, but that's fine. And then once it's at the end, undo and then finish it off. Okay, so I have rambled on for 25 minutes now, which is more than enough. So I'm going to stop here, and then if anyone has any questions, then again let me know, and if I don't know the answer, I'll find